My brother didn't even look up from his phone when my father said it. He just sat there, feet up on the coffee table, scrolling through something that was clearly more important than the fact that our father was telling me to pack my things and get out. The Christmas tree was still up. It was December 27th. The lights blinked in that slow, lazy rhythm that used to feel cozy when I was little. Now they just made the whole scene feel more absurd. "Lena needs the space," my father said. He wasn't shouting. He never shouted. He had this way of delivering devastating things in the same tone he used to read grocery lists. Flat. Final. Like the matter was already settled before he opened his mouth. "She's moving back from Vancouver and she needs a proper room to set up her studio. You're the practical one. You'll figure it out." I had driven 3 hours in an ice storm to be here for the holidays. I was standing in the hallway still wearing my coat. "My room," I said. "Not a question. It's just a room, Nora." I looked past him. The door to my old bedroom was open. They had already started. The wall where I'd kept my bookshelf was bare, the shelves gone, replaced by a ring light on a stand and a clothes rack draped with things that belonged to my younger sister. My desk, the one I'd saved up for in high school and refinished myself one summer, was gone. In its place, a vanity mirror framed with bulbs that buzzed faintly from across the hall. I'd driven 3 hours in an ice storm. My father had not told me ahead of time. He had let me drive here and then told me at the door. I didn't say anything. I walked to the hall closet, pulled out the 2 boxes they had packed for me. The things from my shelves and my drawers put into boxes the way you'd box up a stranger's belongings. No care taken. A snow globe cracked at the base, a photo frame, face down, a book with a broken spine because someone had forced it in sideways. I picked up both boxes. My father had gone back to the living room. My brother had never looked up. I put the boxes in my car. I drove until the ice made it too risky, then pulled into a Comfort Inn off the highway outside of Barrie and sat in the parking lot for a long time with the engine running. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was tired. There is a specific exhaustion that comes from spending 32 years trying to earn something from people who decided before you were old enough to talk that you weren't worth the effort. I had been 12 when I first understood that I was the wrong kind of daughter. My sister Lena was 7 and she had announced at dinner that she wanted to be a singer. My parents had looked at each other across the table with this private smile, the kind that meant something was being decided. That night, my mother called a vocal coach. The following week, my father drove Lena 40 minutes each way to lessons every Saturday. No one asked me what I wanted to be. I had already gotten the message, I think. Even then, I was the steady one. The one who didn't need tending. The one who would figure it out. I figured it out. That was the thing. I figured it out better than any of them knew. They thought I worked in software. Technically, that was true. But software is a large umbrella, and what I actually did sat at a very specific, very quiet corner of it. I was a licensed insolvency trustee and a certified forensic accountant. When companies or individuals were hiding assets in bankruptcy proceedings, when creditors suspected fraud, when courts needed someone to untangle financial structures built deliberately to be untangleable, they called my firm. I had testified as an expert witness 14 times. I had recovered, in the last fiscal year alone, nearly $2 million in assets for clients that a less trained eye would have written off as gone. My family thought I made decent money fixing computer problems for small businesses. I had never corrected them, not because I was embarrassed, but because I had watched carefully, over many years, the way money changed how my family saw people. My uncle came into some inheritance in my early 20s, and my parents spent the next decade treating him like a prophet. Every sentence he spoke at dinner was important. Every decision he made was insightful. I didn't want that. More than that, I didn't trust it. The warmth that comes with knowing someone has money is not warmth at all. It's appetite dressed in a cardigan. So I drove a 2016 Honda Fit with a crack in the passenger side mirror. I shopped at Value Village. I talked about budgeting. I let them see what I wanted them to see. I sat in the Comfort Inn parking lot and I called my firm's emergency line. Not because it was an emergency, but because I needed to hear the automated greeting. I needed to be reminded that I existed in a context where I was competent and known and taken seriously. The recording said my name. It said my title. I hung up. Then I checked my messages and found one from my mother sent 40 minutes before I had arrived at the house. A single line: "Your father wants to talk to you about the room situation when you get here. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I put my phone in my coat pocket, went inside, checked in, and sat on the edge of the motel bed in my coat and boots, and thought about what I was going to do. I am precise by training and deliberate by nature. I do not make decisions in the heat of things, so I didn't decide anything that night. I just started, the way I always start, by looking at the facts. Fact: my parents had, without warning, given away my room to my sister. Fact: they had packed my belongings without asking me. Fact: this was not a new pattern. It was the latest and most concrete expression of a pattern that had been running since I was a child. I ordered room service, something I never did, a club sandwich and a ginger ale, and I opened my laptop. I had been vaguely aware for a few years that my parents' finances were not in good shape. My father had taken early retirement at 61, which would have been fine if they had saved. They had not saved. They had spent. The house in Mississauga, the one I'd grown up in, was big, and it was old, and it cost a lot to heat and maintain, and they had refinanced it twice that I knew of. Lena's singing career had never materialized, but her lifestyle had absorbed money steadily for years. Demo recordings, a move to Vancouver with partial funding from my parents, a return from Vancouver with more. There was always something. I pulled up the Ontario Land Registry. Public record. My parents' property at their address showed a first mortgage registered to a major bank, a second charge registered 18 months ago to a private lender, which was a red flag, and a notice of sale under mortgage filed 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks ago. They were in default. 11 weeks ago, and my mother had texted me for my birthday in November without mentioning it. My father had called me 2 weeks before Christmas to ask if I was coming home and had not mentioned it. They had let me drive 3 hours in an ice storm and had not mentioned it. But they had given my room to Lena. I stared at the registry entry for a long time. Then I ordered a second ginger ale and kept working. The private lender registered on the second charge was a numbered company. That was not unusual, but numbered companies used for private mortgage lending in Ontario often belong to individuals, and with the right tools, which I had, you could usually find out who was behind them. It took me about 40 minutes. The numbered company traced back to a man my father played golf with, a semi-retired developer from Brampton, who I had met twice at barbecues and forgotten immediately. He had lent my parents money against their house. They were in default to him too, so the house was in trouble. Not maybe trouble. Real, legal, documented trouble. The kind of trouble that resolves one of two ways. Either you come up with the money, or the lender moves to sell. I closed the laptop at 2 in the morning. I lay on the motel bed in the dark and I listened to a snowplow go by on the highway. That low, grinding scrape that sounded like the whole world being cleared away. I was not angry at my parents for being in debt. People fall into debt. Life is expensive. What I felt was something colder and more useful than anger. I felt clarity. They had spent decades treating me like the self-sufficient one, which meant in practice that they had spent decades not investing in me, not worrying about me, not celebrating me, because I didn't need it. Lennon needed it. I would be fine. That was the agreement I had never agreed to. And now they were in trouble, real trouble, and they had not told me, had not asked for my help or my advice, had simply handed my room to the sister they'd always preferred and sent me back out into the cold. Fine. I picked up my phone. I called a real estate lawyer I worked with professionally, a measured woman named Ms. Tremblay, who answered her phone at unusual hours because difficult financial situations rarely waited for business ones. I need to talk through a scenario, I said. I explained the land registry situation. She walked me through the legal position. If the lender under the second charge wanted to move to power of sale and the notice had been filed 11 weeks ago, the redemption period in Ontario was 35 days for residential property. That had expired. They could proceed. Could a third party purchase the defaulted mortgage? I asked. From the private lender, you mean? Miss Tremblay was quiet for a moment. It's not common, but yes. If the lender agrees to assign the mortgage, a third party could step into their position. And what happens to the homeowners in that scenario? They now owe the money to the new holder. If they still can't pay, the new holder has the same rights the original lender had. She paused. Nora, is this about family? It's about a defaulted mortgage, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. I slept 4 hours. Not good sleep, the kind where you're aware of the ceiling the whole time. But it was enough. I was up before 6. I showered, changed into the spare clothes I kept in the car because I always kept a spare set in the car. The practical daughter, the one who planned for things, and I drove to a Tim Hortons and sat with a large coffee and my laptop for 3 hours. I called the private lender directly. I had his name from the registry trace. I looked up his LinkedIn, which was sparse but real. I found a general contact number. I called on a Tuesday morning in late December, which is not a time most people are at their sharpest, and I introduced myself using my professional title and my firm's name, both of which land with a specific kind of weight in financial conversations. He knew what an insolvency trustee was. He was not happy about this call, not because he suspected anything, but because the situation with my parents was clearly a headache he hadn't planned on. He had lent them money as a favor, he said, a personal favor. They had put the house up, and it had seemed straightforward. Now, it was not straightforward. I have a client interested in acquiring the position, I said. This was technically true. The client was me, through a numbered company I had incorporated 2 years earlier for a property investment I had ultimately not made. The company was real. It was registered. It had a business account. They're prepared to move quickly before the holidays are fully over. No litigation, no delays. He was quiet for a moment. What's the offer? I named a number that was slightly above what my parents owed on the second charge. Not dramatically above, just enough to make it interesting. He came back with a counter. We settled in the range I had planned for. I told him Mr. Tremblay's firm would handle the paperwork. He said he'd have his lawyer in touch. The assignment closed on January 4th. My parents did not know. Why would they? A mortgage assignment is a transaction between lenders. The homeowners are notified by mail that the holder of their debt has changed. A letter went to the house. My parents probably assumed it was routine paperwork. People don't always read those letters carefully. I spent the rest of the week working. I had a file that needed attention, a small manufacturing company in Hamilton whose owners were trying to hide equipment assets ahead of a creditor claim, and work was, as always, the clearest thing in my life. I was good at it. It made sense. I did not contact my parents. My mother texted twice, once to ask if I had found somewhere to stay, once to say there was leftover turkey in the fridge if I wanted to come by. I read both messages. I did not respond. On January 8th, I arranged a meeting. Miss Mine. Tremblay's office, which was professional and neutral, a boardroom with a long table and a view of the CN Tower on clear days and fog on this one. I had my brother call my parents to tell them there was something important they needed to come in for. A legal matter, he said, related to the house. I let him deliver the message because he was the one they listened to. The son. The easy one. And also because I needed him in that room for reasons that would become clear. They arrived in the way people arrive when they know something is wrong but haven't decided yet how worried to be. My mother was dressed nicely. My father was stiff around the jaw. My brother, who I had told only that it was serious, sat with his arms crossed looking at his phone. Lena, who I had specifically asked to include, came in last, carrying a large coffee and looking inconvenienced. Miss Spett. Tremblay was not there in person. Her associate was, a young man named, appropriately, Mr. Sharp, who had the energy of someone who had been briefed thoroughly and was there to deliver information without editorializing. I came in from the side door. My mother blinked. Nora, what is this? I sat down. I had worn my work clothes, the charcoal blazer, the kind you wear when you're testifying, when you need the room to understand in the first 5 seconds that you are not someone to be managed. This is a briefing, I said. About the house. My father's face shifted. How do you know about the house? I looked it up, I said. Ontario Land Registry is public record. You're in default on 2 mortgages. You have been for almost 3 months. The private lender you borrowed from registered a notice of sale in October. Lena set down her coffee. My brother finally looked up from his phone. We were handling it, my father said. Were you? We had a plan. We were going to talk to the bank. The bank won't refinance a property with 2 charges and a notice of sale, I said. Not unkindly, just factually, the way I say things in depositions. What was the actual plan? Silence. The specific silence of people who did not have an actual plan. Mr. Sharp, I said. He opened the folder in front of him. He passed a copy to each of them. My father's went face up and I watched his eyes move across the page. The way eyes do when they're reading something but the brain is running ahead trying to figure out what it means. This is a notice of assignment, I said. The second mortgage on your property has been purchased from its original holder. The new holder is a numbered company called 1247832 Ontario Inc. My father looked up. Who is that? That's me, I said. The rune did something runes do sometimes. It seemed to contract slightly, like something had been vacuumed out of the air. You, my mother said. I've been a licensed insolvency trustee for 6 years, I said. I hold a CPA designation with a forensic specialization. Last year my income, before bonuses, was $380,000. I said the number flat, the way you say a postal code. I could have paid off both of your mortgages without touching my savings. I didn't. Because I didn't know about them. Because no one told me. Because apparently I am the one in this family who figures things out and therefore doesn't need to be considered. My brother made a sound that wasn't a word. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. I want to be honest about that. What I'm here to do is be clear about what the situation is, legally, because I don't think anyone in this room has been fully clear about that yet. Mr. Sharp, on cue, turned to the second page of the document. The redemption period on the second charge has passed, I said. As the current holder, I have the right to proceed to power of sale. That would mean the property is listed, the proceeds pay off the first mortgage and my charge, and whatever remains, if anything, comes to you. I paused. There would not be much remaining. You would sell our house, my father said. Low. A bit hollow. I'm telling you what the legal situation is, I said. What I'm actually proposing is different. I had thought about this carefully, not in anger. Anger is imprecise. I had thought about it the way I think about any file, from the outside, with the structure visible. I'll restructure the second mortgage, I said. Fair interest, formal terms, payments that are realistic, but there are conditions. Lena made a sharp sound. You're holding our house hostage. Your parents' house, I said, which they own, and which they borrowed against, and which is in default. I'm offering a way to keep it that doesn't involve a power of sale. I looked at her directly, which, for clarity, was the trajectory it was on before I got involved. Lena looked at my father. My father looked at the document. The conditions, my mother said finally. Quietly. She was the one I had always found hardest to read, not because she was difficult, but because she had a way of shrinking into situations that made her seem like a bystander in her own life. The conditions are 3, I said. First, no more financial support to Lena from the household. Whatever my sister chooses to do with her life, it's on her to fund it. That's not a punishment. It is the reality of a household that is in serious debt and cannot absorb additional discretionary spending. Lena's jaw tightened. Second, I am to be kept informed of any significant financial decisions going forward. Not consulted, necessarily. Informed. I don't need to approve your choices. I do need to not be blindsided by land registry records. My brother shifted in his seat. I didn't look at him. Third, I want the cost of my old desk back. Replacement value, not sentimental value. I looked it up. It's $430. That goes to a charity of my choosing. The room was quiet. That's it? My brother asked. That's it? My father looked at me for a long time. He had the look of a person reassembling something. A picture they'd had in their head that no longer matched what was in front of them. My father had always been the most certain person I knew. Certainty, I had figured out somewhere in my 20s, is sometimes just the absence of information. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't. I gathered the copies of the document from the table, leaving one copy for each of them. Miss Tremblay's office will send the formal restructuring agreement by end of week. Read it. Have a lawyer look at it if you want. It's a fair document. I stood up. Nora, my mother said. I stopped. She didn't say anything else for a moment. Then, why didn't you tell us? What you did? What you made? It was a fair question. I had thought about how to answer it. Because I wanted to be loved for what I was, I said, not for what I had. And because I think I already knew what the answer would be. I put on my coat. I picked up my bag. My brother followed me into the hallway. He looked young suddenly, which he was, 28. And it occurred to me that I had been protecting him from a lot of this without really intending to. Just by being the capable one, the one who handled things, the buffer. I didn't know how bad it was, he said. The money stuff. I know, I said. They didn't tell me either. They didn't tell anyone, I said. That was part of the problem. He nodded. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. The desk, he said, I could look for it. Where they put it. I bought a new one, I said. Keep it. I drove home to my apartment in Toronto, 45 minutes on a clear day, an hour and 15 in January traffic. My apartment was small and quiet and mine. A one-bedroom on the 18th floor with a view of the lake on the west side, the water gray and flat in winter. And I had bought it outright, no mortgage, 2 years ago. And I had told no one the full story of how I did that. I made tea. I stood at the window. The lake did what it always did in January, which is sit there being enormous and indifferent, and I found that comforting. I did not block my family. That was the version of the story that felt clean and final, in a way real life doesn't usually offer. What I did was more ordinary and, I think, more honest. I stopped performing. I stopped being the easy one, the low-maintenance one. The one who figures it out and asks for nothing. I started asking for things. I started seeing when something wasn't working. I started taking up the space I'd always been technically allowed but had learned early not to occupy. The restructuring agreement was signed. My parents stayed in the house. Lena got a job at a marketing firm in Toronto, which she complained about for several months and then stopped complaining about, which I took to mean she had found something in it. My father called me in March. Not about anything specific, just to talk, which he had not done in years that I could count. We talked for 22 minutes. It was awkward in places. It was awkward the longest conversation we'd had, where neither of us was performing something for the other. The desk turned up in my brother's apartment. He had taken it when they were clearing the room, liked it, and had been using it as a TV stand. He offered to return it. I told him to make a donation instead. He donated $200 to the Trillium Gift of Life Network, which was not what I had said, but was also fine. Some things don't resolve the way you'd want them to. Most things don't. But there is a specific satisfaction in looking at a situation clearly, in knowing exactly what the numbers say and what the law says and what you are actually owed, and making your decisions from that place instead of from fear or longing or the old, exhausting hope that this time might be different. I still drive the Honda, not as camouflage anymore. I just like it. It's paid off and it runs well and it doesn't ask anything of me, which, after everything, I find I appreciate more than I used to.